Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? The panelist, Sarah, hi there.
Hi.
Hi, hi. Charles. Oh, you're on mute, Charles. Let's see.
All right, I just unmuted myself.
Oh, there's feedback. Um, awesome. So, hi, everyone. We have some attendees joining us, and some are rolling through, and we will continue. In the meantime, while I am speaking, I'm just going to go ahead and mute everyone else so there isn't a feedback. But thank you all who are on as attendees for this call for BAAD, Virtually BAAD. This is an initiative, a continuation of Badass Woman Festival. And we thank you so much for joining us through these times that we're in with COVID-19 and what it's done to really the globe and our communities. And so this is really an important initiative for BAAD to continue the festivals that we have, especially during this time. We find it's more important during this time to really allow the artists to present their work to the community, and in an interesting way where now it's all virtual. So it's able to really reach people far and near and beyond. And just so you all know who I am, I'm Gerard Minaya. I'm Programming Associate at BAAD, BAAD Bronx Academy of Arts and Dance. BAAD has been around for 21 years, and it was created by two directors, Charles Rice Gonzalez, who's the executive director, and Arthur Aviles, who is the artistic director. And they created it 21 years ago in a warehouse in Hunts Point. And started with 6 festivals, and we have them throughout the year. And this one is a new one, like I had mentioned earlier, Virtually BAAD. And so we thank you so much for coming and joining on. Let's see. We're going to continue talking and introing and kind of giving a bit of structure of what's going to be happening today. Today we have Sarah Schulman, who is going to be doing a reading of her new novel that is in progress. So it's going to be very exciting to hear that. I welcome and encourage all attendees during this meeting to continue writing on the chat, as I'm seeing right now with people commenting, and on the Q&As. After the reading, we're going to have a Q&A where Sarah will, have the floor to open any questions that were sent our way. So I encourage you all to continue writing on this chat. I'm going to be monitoring it, and on the Q&A for any questions that you may want to put. And now I will mute myself after this, but I am going to now introduce Charles Rice Gonzalez.
Hey everybody, great to be here, and I'm glad that folks are joining us. As Gerard said, this is an opportunity for us to continue doing the work that we do at BAAD. We figured we wanted to do a response to it, and so doing live programming with people that we admire and love was important for us to continue doing. And so we realize when we go on an online platform that very often people are signing in from all different kinds of places. And so Gerard's intro was really to give you a little bit of an orientation on BAAD in case you've never been to the space that we have in the Bronx. You get a sense of the programming that we'll do online. But also we weren't making the assumption that everybody knows the amazing Sarah Schulman. So we wanted to take a moment also to introduce Sarah a little bit to the folks who are joining us. So Sarah is an amazing author. She's done 19 books, including several novels, The Cosmopolitans and Maggie Terry, People in Trouble, and also very nonfiction books called Israel, Palestine, and the Queer International, Gentrifications of the Mind, Witness to a Lost Imagination, and also Conflict is Not Abuse, one of her most latest nonfiction books that has traveled all over the world and has transformed lives. And many of the books that I've read, all of Sarah's books, have really had an impact on me. And she's someone who I admire and study as well the work that she does. I've had the privilege of being her student as well as an MFA student, so I had that closeness, and we've maintained our relationship. But in addition to a writer, Sarah is an activist. Sarah is a person that is I consider one of our great thinkers who is constantly thinking about the world and the state that is in. There's a compassion and a logic that I always feel that comes through in her work, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, or in plays. And so I'm very fortunate, I feel, to be close, have proximity to Sarah, and it gives me a great pleasure to introduce her today. So everyone, please welcome the amazing Sarah Schulman, who will be reading from her latest work that is a work in progress, a novel in progress. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, all you wonderful people. So this is a novel I've been writing since 2003. It's been ongoing for a long time, and I'm just going to read one chapter, and it's called New York City, 1967. Urban children roam, and that is their privilege. It's a city of pigeons, laundry, and freedom, where even the youngest are free. They take subways alone from the age of 8 with cardboard passes issued by the Board of Ed. This is the guaranteed free ride, and they all take it for granted. By the time the girl was 12, she had been everywhere on a whim. World's Fair Park in Flushing, okay, that's typical, but also Van Cortlandt to ride the ponies. She'd been to the wild boardwalk by the Taming Sea and run into the Atlantic Ocean in her underpants. She'd gone to the Elgin movie theater to see Gone with the Wind and smelled the grass the other kids were smoking. It wouldn't be fair to say that she was always solo. Occasionally a lonely sidekick, a strange, interesting kid who no one else cared about, and the two of them would discuss and look. This current pal was Gary. Fat boys made the best friends because they were desperate and had become learned in the cruel ways of the popular others. In fact, Anita and Gary met crying over not being invited to the important kids' party. The pain was a lens of recognition, and the honesty became a vow. I promise to help you, Anita swore. I promise to help you. And then, as friends must do, they talked through all the reasons, the missteps, the better ways to live, and discovered together a desire to reconcile with those meanies. Extend a hand and work together. Have our own party, Anita proposed. Then once we invite them, they will invite us back. It was a grand scheme. The two friends spent an afternoon writing on napkins and creating little drawings of flowers, daisies. They put these handmade invitations into the lockers of their classmates and started making plans. You are invited to a party. Tuesday after school, 3:30 at Gary's house. Refreshments will be served. On the appointed day, the two went off to Gary's place down the block and walked up the 3 flights to his apartment. The father, a tall, fierce, red-bearded man, was a painter and had set up in the entry room as his studio. It was awkward for the rest of the family, but that was the home to 2 large essential windows. Opening the front door meant stepping onto newspapers and facing the father giant, perched long upon an impossibly high stool with a rickety wooden easel before him, looking way down below in annoyance. Next was a kitchen where a long-haired, sad woman in a peasant dress made some kind of food when she wasn't dreaming of another world, sitting quietly ready to burst. Behind that, the parents' mattress lay on the floor, surrounded by some items that were unrecognizable to Anita, like little drums, notebooks, books of poetry, ashtrays, peculiar toy-like grown-up possessions, and sketches taped to the walls. Behind that was Gary's room, impeccably clean. He kept his own towels and washed them with his own clothes at the laundromat because he knew how he wanted them to be, the only uncluttered moment in his life. Gary went into the bottom drawer of his bureau and took out his greatest possession, a Monopoly set his grandmother had sent him for Christmas. It was sparkling clean. Some nights he woke up and dusted off the cards, staring at Boardwalk and Park Place, dreaming of get out of jail free. How many do you think will come? Well, Anita was the mastermind here, so she had to produce answers. We invited Jeff, Nina, Scotty R, Scotty S, Robin, Tiana, Julia, Steve, Pablo. With us, that makes 11. They looked around the tiny dark room. 4 people could fit in there if nobody moved. We will be 4, Anita decided. She started counting out the money for 4 players in neat stacks of green 20s and pink 5s. Then Gary opened the bag of groceries they had snuck in past his parents, a loaf of Wonder Bread. His parents forbade this, and Anita's parents ate rye bread, but they'd both decided by carefully observing lunches that the popular kids ate Wonder Bread, and that's what they needed to serve. He took out a package of napkins and a pound of bologna from Teddy the Butcher on University Place. Anita had gone to him since she was born, and he always gave kids a free piece of bologna. It was sweet and comforting, the way it came off the slicer and melted in her mouth. The bologna was her recommendation and thought it a good choice. Then Gary produced a jar of mayonnaise. This was another mystery food. Anita grew up with mustard, and there seemed to be 2 separate kinds of people, the mayonnaisers and the mustardites. Gary cracked open the jar, took out a clean knife he had prepared, and started spreading it on the Wonder Bread, adding 3 slices of bologna. These sandwiches would be the treats for the Monopoly players. They would shake the dice with one hand and take a bite from the other while gleefully rolling on the floor, chattering about houses and hotels. Anita watched him quietly, and then the 2 friends prepared to wait. After a while, they stopped talking about what was going to happen at the party and started discussing Gary's fish. He had a new minnow. Then he discussed cleaning while Anita looked out the window. Then she sat silently, and the 2 filled the space only with waiting. They were both readers, so mercifully, somehow by agreement, they both pulled out the cellophane-covered library editions each one always carried. Crinkling was the sound books made. Gary read Harriet the Spy, and Anita was on her second tour of A Member of the Wedding. Gary rolled onto his back, worn striped shirt riding short above his belly. Anita leaned on her elbows and swallowed the pages. Both of the protagonists of these novels were boyish girls with great minds and a deep, sorrowful loneliness. And soon Gary and Anita were discussing that fact and imagining the adventure of belonging. Gary picked up his sandwich. "No one is coming," he said, and then he began to eat. Anita looked into the air. Would it always be like this? How do you get other people to care? Gary turned on the radio. Yummy, 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 I've got love in my tummy and I feel like I'm loving you. That, said the disc jockey, was the new hit single from the Ohio Express. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Can I have your sandwich? Okay. She didn't want to have anything to do with it. What's Ohio? Gary said. It's a state. And in today's news, writer Carson McCullers, author of Member of the Wedding, was admitted to New York Hospital after having suffered another stroke. What's a stroke? Gary asked. It's like a heart attack. Anita had a reassuring quality to her assumption of authority. It didn't really matter if she knew exactly what a stroke was. What mattered was that she knew it could be lethal or worse, produced what was called in whispers, a vegetable. And in that way, it resembled heart attacks, cancer, and being hit by a car, or jumping off of buildings like her cousin had done just a few months before. Lying together on the floor, each holding their books about wayward girls, the knowledge that no one cared about them enough to come to a party was redundant, like bringing wet to the river. Now we know. Know what? Gary's teeth sunk into that pasty bread. That no one is ever going to invite us to any parties. Gary looked stunned. Failure had not been a consideration. No, he cried. How do we make it different? He wept. His sadness was an open gulf of pain. All his life he would cry cumulatively, but this was ahead of him, and he would die of AIDS. The burden was Anita's. She had to solve the problem for them both, the problem of being unloved and unwanted. It surged through her, this responsibility. Her teeth slapped like they did when the IRT lurched, and she clutched the leather straps on the subway car, colliding with a kindly, crumpeted nun whose hair was hidden from view. Where is New York Hospital? Gary asked. Uptown. His mother appeared at this point. What are you eating? Bologna sandwiches? Gary, she whined, like he had soiled himself and was just too old for that. She looked sad too, and then seized their contraband. Gary both protested and cried, while Anita was hushed by the larger dilemma, the mystery of sadness itself. Neither of the children attempted to explain the scenario, why they had gone to such lengths to create bad sandwiches, why the Monopoly money was set out in 4 separate piles when there were only 2 players. They were mum. Sharing the calamity that had befallen them that day would have been futile. The mother would not have understood. Mothers always predict change that never came. They were talking to themselves. She would discount their claims, their recognition that of all the children in the world, they were the objects of exclusion forever. That when their classmates grew up and had weddings, neither Gary nor Anita would be invited. And when there were cocktail parties, they would still be standing outside. Anita walked out as the early evening's gray started to descend. She didn't want to go home. There would be no one to talk to. Her father's disappointment, a wall of silence. Her exhausted mother putting bland food on the table, the yelling. Sometimes Anita wished that her father would look her in the eye and say something kind, but it never happened. When he did say friendly things, he was always looking away, like he was scared or shy. When he was angry, he would put his face close to hers, but there was still some kind of glaze. She felt like a thing. They didn't hold the same interests, that was clear. Daddy liked being at his job, and people there thought he was very important. He hated being home because it was just not that same way. Home was supposed to be better than work, but in her father's case, it was not. And he hated that. It was wrong, and the culprit was clearly herself. She started walking uptown instead, as she had done many times before. Crossing streets was a New York pastime, and walking blocks in the gray when the sky met the concrete was a way of life. She crossed 14th Street, where the bag ladies sold salted pretzels from a basket, and went through the no man's land of discount shops and empty office buildings. When you walk, you are alone. She knew that couples would go for a walk as a kind of date, but then they would end up at the bar of the Cattleman restaurant to have the free fried chicken, and she was too young to go to a bar. When Anita thought of her future, she thought of driving a red sports car, a convertible, of wearing a bikini and playing volleyball on a beach. She thought of having a boyfriend who was bland and blonde and looked like no one she had ever actually seen in real life. It had been an hour now. Everyone was walking in the gray. It was the normal way to live. You go to work and then you walk. That's what life is like. Sometimes people stopped at coffee shops and ate the bowl full of free pickles placed on each table. Then they'd have a rice pudding and coffee or hot chocolate. That was regular life. She stopped at a phone booth and dropped her dime. Canal 8, 0151. Grandma? What's the matter? Nothing, I'm going to be late. What are you doing? My school is at the museum. Very nice. She walked into the lobby of the hospital. It was gray and somewhat dank. Worried faces on overdressed bodies paraded the hallways. The wooden walls had photographs of men shaking hands. Carson McCullers, please. The nurse was young. She seemed to be from another place, like the middle of America, where skin was naturally rubbed pink and girls put blue on their eyes. How do you spell that? Mccullers. It was an unusual name, not like Luigi or John. Are you a family member? Anita nodded. 6K. Stepping out into the 6th floor, Anita passed the rooms, almost all with doors slightly ajar. One was packed with a raucous family, 3 generations. They had brought their own food and were telling jokes and laughing. Another held an Orthodox Jew with a long yellowed beard. He was lost. Whoever was in the bed didn't have much to say. His hands were opened in prayer. What do you want from me? The next room had a young white man. He sat in his gown in his chair smoking, looking out the window. He saw Anita and looked into her eyes, just the way she wished her father would. He was the loneliest man she had ever seen. He was so lonely that he didn't even wave. He couldn't try anymore. He had to sit there and listen to the families and the lovers and the people cracking jokes, trying to make someone else feel good. And then she realized that someday Anita, too, would be in a hospital. Who would be sleeping in the chair by her side? She had better learn now how to tolerate loneliness so that later, when she needed to, she'd know how. She had to get to a place where other human beings would be unbearable. She'd be better off without them. That was the only way to go, it seemed. She'd better be prepared to lie in that bed. She'd have to learn how to dream or smoke. Room 6K was painted a pale seafoam green, the color of their gym suits at school. Anita walked in quietly, moving gently towards a lone, tiny figure, barely a bump under the sheet in the bed. Death was alive in the finished body before her, face transparent, her teeth protruding, hands clawed, her eyes glazed, staring at nothing and then adjusting as that nothing opened its heart to an unknown young girl, brown hair in a ponytail, wearing a shirt dress, tights, and penny loafers, carrying a book, a grim little girl, a sad girl, a smart little brown-haired Anita. The old woman smiled. Someone was there. Excuse me, the shy, bold child said, frightened of her own daring. Are you Carson McCullers? Yes. The voice was gravelly, hoarse, used, disappointed, broken. Anita had not planned what she was going to say. Mrs. McCullers, I love you. Thank you. I read Member of the Wedding and it changed my life. I love you too, Carson said slowly. She could not lift her head. Even the first line is amazing, Anita said. She opened the book. She knew the line by heart, but reading it gave an extra layer of feeling. It happened that green and crazy summer when Frankie was 12 years old. This was the summer when for a long time she had not been a member. Carson smiled. You see, Anita explained, and Carson looked her right in the eye with kindness, that listening kind of understanding that the young girl craved. Carson gave her forgiveness for having barged in. She gave Anita a silent compassion and the recognition that there was something special in her that required rules to be overlooked. It's the word crazy that tips it, Anita explained. Comfortable, finally in with her own kind. I mean, anyone can say that it was a green summer, but to say that it was a green and crazy summer, where the whole world opens up and becomes filled with those dark, sad feelings of girls being alone, being too bright for their time, and no one loves them. Thank you so much, Carson said. I'm very tired now. I want to go to sleep. Will you read to me? Sure. Anita sat down in the big chair next to the bed. It was so wide, it would have held the fat man from 11th Street, and her feet did not touch the ground. She started reading from the end. The world was now so far away that Frances could no longer think of it. She could not see the earth as in the old days, crackled and loose and turning 1,000 miles an hour. The earth was enormous and still and flat. Between herself and all the places, there was a space like an enormous canyon she could not hope to bridge or cross. Anita understood her feelings in the process of speaking. That's what writers do, isn't it? The discovery is in the writing. How had Member of the Wedding changed her life? It made her want to be a writer. That was it. After all, what brought Anita to this bedside, to become a writer. She would be a writer and sit behind a desk in a gray flannel skirt suit, cigarette burning in the glass ashtray. She would be famous and she would be loved. She would see what no one else would see, and everyone would be glad about it. They would want to know. Normal people get invited to parties just because they are there, but Anita would have to be special. Those were the facts, and she had to face them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to go ahead and for the attendees that are here with me, I'm going to promote everyone to panelists. There you will be given the opportunity to share your video or just simply share your audio. So I'm doing that now.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Hello.
Anyone have any thoughts or questions that you want to share?
Well, I have a question, Sarah.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that work. It was there was something I think even for me romantic, because there's something romantic about New York City and descriptions and kind of like the culture that kind of comes through. I'm curious if you could say more about Carson McCullers, because there was a moment when they meet. It was just such a beautiful moment. And I know you have a particular, I will just say admiration, but connection to Carson McCullers. If you could speak a little bit more about that.
Well, I have been interested in her all of my life. And in 2000, I wrote a play about her that was developed at the Sundance Theater Lab. And then it had its world premiere at Playwrights Horizons in 2002. But the play was too early because one of the things that I had realized in my work on McCullers was that I came to understand that she had what we now call a trans identity, that she had a male identity. And I said this in the play, and I also, which was directed by the late Marion McClinton, who just passed away. And this was really unacceptable in 2002. So the play was really misunderstood by, at that time, every theater critic in New York was a white male. And it was not reviewed by any women or people of color, and it was just misunderstood. And I was just very frustrated with that. So I've been working on her continuously. I've written a film called Lonely Hunter,
Peter.
the biopic of Carson McCullers, and now I'm working with her in this novel. But what's interesting is that a few years ago, when they had her centenary, I was actually invited to give the keynote because so much has changed that people came to appreciate and understand where I was coming from with the material. So if you live long enough, sometimes things can turn around. Anyone with any thoughts or questions out there? There's 40-something of you out there. Thank you so much for listening.
Before anyone else begins, I'm just going to reinforce that this is a recording streaming service right now. So everyone is aware that this is being recorded and it's being live streamed on BAAD's Facebook. Another just quick note for everyone. If you're not speaking, if you could mute yourself so that we eliminate background noise. Thank you.
Here.
Could I say something?
something, Sarah? First of all, it's so lovely to see you and hear you read. We love you and miss you. And I just love the way you read it because there's such love for your characters. You bring them to life. And just, that's really all I have to say. It's so moving.
Oh, thank you, Laura.
In this incredibly dark, lonely time. So thank you. That's really what I want to say.
Yeah, we went to high school together. So you were a New Yorker in 1967 and you remember.
Well, I was imagining you as that little girl.
To some degree.
To some degree.
Yeah.
Just in the hospital room. That was the only part because I didn't
Right.
so much. So yeah, but thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Jack.
Hello. Thanks. I think, in fact, I know you read this section when we were in Italy, in Basilico. And I think there have been some changes, not big ones. But I'm wondering, do you have an anticipated publish date for the novel?
Well, I have 173 pages of this novel, and I need another 100. So I'm hoping, it all depends. Everything's on hold now. So,
Right. Yeah.
but I'm hoping that soon I'll have time to work on it because I have just finished this massive history of ACT UP New York. That it's 700 pages, and it's going to be published by FSG in May 2021. And I've delivered the book, so that's done. Now I really do have time to work on this again, and I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Great, I look forward.
Thank you, Jack.
Chicago evidently is doing you well, by the way.
Yes, I'm lucky. Yeah.
Good, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll jump in here.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Aaron.
Hi. Can I be heard?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, greetings from Jackson Heights. Just one general question. If part of this novel is, your place and time, how much of it is, New York as you remember it, and how much did you have to research?
Well, the novel's not set in 1967, just this one chapter.
Okay.
It's an absolutely epic novel.
Okay.
Actually about the history of psychiatry. I know you can't tell from this, but it starts in 1956 and it goes to 2013. It's like this huge, complex, epic thing that's very hard to represent because it's works by juxtaposition. And I've written a couple of novels that use juxtaposition, Empathy in 1992, and more recently a novel called The Mere Future. But usually I work in a more realist kind of traditional narrative, but this one doesn't work that way, and it's very hard to represent it, actually. But this is just this is an anomaly. This chapter.
Okay.
But 2 novels ago was the Cosmopolitans, which is set in Greenwich Village in 1958, and that's the year I was born. And I did very little research because it's interesting how much. Are you a native New Yorker? I can't remember.
Born here, but raised in the Midwest.
Okay, because we have these historical memories that are older than we are. Because when you're growing up somewhere, people say, "Oh, that used to be blah 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 blah," or things are at their end that were at their peak before you were born, and things like that. So I actually can remember back to a more post-war period because of New York lore and that sort of thing. Because this is all pre-gentrification, so there was a different kind of development pattern. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Aaron.
Sarah, why are those the dates for the history of psychiatry, if you could say?
Well, it starts with, it starts with the post-war period when refugee psychiatrists who were the originals were forced to come to New York. And they had a belief that healing takes place in relationship. And when they came to America after the war, they were confronted with, and they were mostly like German Jews, they were confronted with Russian Jews where American psychiatry really was very invested in the new development of antidepressants. Because they were treating, the European psychiatry was based on an elite. American psychiatry was based on treating masses of soldiers after World War II who had all kinds of war trauma. And so there was a clash between these two groups of psychiatrists about how does healing take place? Does it take place in relationship, or does it take place in a medicalized setting? Of course, we now know the answer is both, right? But at the time, it was a polarized conversation. So that's where it begins. With this refugee psychiatrist is a supervisor of a young American psychiatrist, and they're having a conflict about this new invention of antidepressants. That's the opening scene. Yeah. Anyone else? Oh, hi, Peter.
Hi, Sarah.
Nice to see you.
I don't know if you can hear me, but
I can.
my remark was just kind of the enjoyment of listening to the kids talking about whether or not anyone was going to show up and how it's relate to our all gathering here. And very heartened to see so many people here.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I know, and
Marvelous.
enjoyed that part of the reading.
Thank you. Oh, hi, Barry. Hello.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
We were just also trying to think about how, gee, this sounds kind of familiar somehow. Did we hear part of this before?
Yeah, I wrote it when we were all together.
Yes, I
Yes.
remember. And it was really amazing to hear how it was fleshed out since Maratea. Really very honored to have that kind of insight into your process.
Right, because when we celebrated Brad Taylor's 60th birthday by all of us renting this huge house in Italy together, we may never be able to do again.
No.
Yeah, but it was a wonderful time. And yeah, that's right. That's where I first wrote it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
thanks for fleshing it out. And I really loved your comment about how our historical memory predates our birth because of everything we hear from people. It's really so true. That's I've never really understood why I feel like I could remember into the very early post-war period and even before it. It's because of what we hear. So what we hear from who we know forms our historical memory in very important ways.
Yeah, if we have a strong sense of place. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good luck with the rest of the
Thanks so much for
other
listening.
100 pages.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Lisa, I don't see you. Lisa, I can't. Oh, hi, Peter.
How many decades are you covering? So we just heard
It starts in the
67,
50s and it goes till 2013.
2013.
Yeah, so it's like 60 to 70 years. It's epic. It's like, yeah. Yeah.
And are the rest of the decades kind of done age-wise?
It's not chronological.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's this parallel story of Carson McCullers' life that intersects with some of the characters in other ways as well. That's interwoven. And you know,
characters are getting older and you're coming back to them?
some of them, well, it's really about the children of these two. So these two psychiatrists, and they both have daughters,
Right.
and what happens with them. And one becomes an actress. So there's a whole thing about that as well. I know I don't yet have my plot summary. I don't have my soundbite about it yet.
Oh, that's
It's all still unfolding.
You've got time.
Yes, I do.
A lot of time to think about it now.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks. Okay, then.
Hi, Sarah.
Oh, hi, Shelley. Hi, Martha.
Hi. Hello from North Carolina.
Oh, thanks for listening.
Our pleasure. I mean, my pleasure. I was so touched and moved by your tender rendering of the Anita is at that age. It's such a vulnerable age, and you just really captured it beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Were you a girl writer?
Yes.
Do you know how old were you when you started writing?
I had a poem published when I was 16.
Oh, there you go.
In
Wow.
local paper, the Medford Mercury. So
Yeah,
I was.
you had to be ambitious because you sent it in.
Oh no, my teacher sent it in.
Oh, okay.
That's a long story. I'll tell you another time.
Okay.
I have a question. What was the first Carson McCullers novel you read?
Probably Member of the Wedding, and I didn't really understand it. It was only when I returned to it. There was this actress named Angie Phillips who I really, really liked. And one time I said to her, you know, you look like Carson McCullers. And she said, who's that? And I just thought, well, she should play Carson McCullers. So I just started rereading. And when I got into it as an adult, I realized how complex the books were. Those books were taught to teenage girls, you know, in school. And they weren't taught with the complexity that they really have. You know, and then I came back to it. And since then, I've read everything. I've read all her juvenilia. I've read everything written about her. You know, there's some excellent biographies. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Is that your favorite book of hers?
I think it's the Hunter, the
Lonely Hunter. That's a remarkable book. She was 23 when that was published in 1940. Yeah.
I have
Thank
lots.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here, I was wondering if you wanted to comment on what it's like to go from the opus magnus history you just wrote to writing fiction, or have you just been doing both at the same time?
Thank you for that question. I'm primarily a novelist, and that's my identity, and that's how I see everything. And then I write these nonfiction things because somebody has to. That's how I feel about them. It's not like that's not my first passion. And this ACT UP history, it had to be done. You know, the history had been so narrowed that it was at this point a parody. And it was I was just so upset about it. And Jim Hubbard and I in 2001 had created the ACT UP Oral History Project, which people can find at actuporalhistory.org. And we had interviewed 188 surviving members of ACT UP over 18 years and put their transcripts for free online on this website. And it's had 14 million hits. And we were like, wow, we'll just create this data and somebody will write this incredible book. And then it never happened. And it was making me crazy. And then Jim was like, you're just gonna have to do it. And so I just had to do it. That's different than a novel, which is what I really love, and plays. Those are my two loves. Yeah, thanks, Laura. Okay, anybody else?
John Hager wants to speak.
Oh, John, where are you?
Hi, Sarah. My name is Johnny. We don't know each other, but I've been following you on Facebook and I've been reading your books. So I just wanted to send a little bit of an appreciation for that. I just finished People in Trouble about 3 or 4 days ago. And I had read Conflict Does Not Have Views on the Gentrification of the Mind. So more than anything, I want to just appreciate your reading today and also say that it's really, I like your writing because the actual prose I feel like I can follow with ease. And I think my question was more, it's already been answered. You say you're primarily a novelist. I find that your writing is really political in essence. And so I found so many things that were similar in gentrification and People in Trouble that I really appreciated. So I really look forward to this most recent novel. I really look forward to the next 100 pages.
Thank you so much, John. If you send me a message on Facebook, I wrote a preface to the new edition of People in Trouble that was rejected by their lawyers.
Oh.
So if you send me a message on Facebook, I'll send it to you.
I would love to. That's the one I bought actually from England. That's the one I have.
Exactly.
So I will definitely send you a message.
I have to distribute that by hand.
Fabulous.
Okay, thank you so much. Anyone else?
I love that Peter is showing us some aloe. It's just
Okay, well, I guess that's it. Thank you so much, Gerard and Charles, and thank you, BAAD, and thank you, everybody. I can't believe 40 people listen to this. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
It is.
We
Thank you.
We should all cheer in right now.
Yes, yes.
Everyone unmute and give
Thank
a
you,
holler.
Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Love from Paris. On the way to the future.
Well, thanks everybody for coming and for being a part of it, and we thank Sarah for agreeing to do this. I mean, this started because I read a post that she said she had a reading that had been canceled, and then I said, "Oh, why don't we just do a reading of what she was going to read?" So we want to thank you, Sarah, for saying yes and for sharing your work with us this evening.
Thanks for doing it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And just before everyone leaves this call, I just want to reiterate and emphasize, please check baadbronx.org. We are rolling out new information. It seems like on a daily basis on virtually BAAD. So there is going to be, more opportunities to join us on Zoom and see who we are going to present. So stay tuned for more information. And there's, I believe, 3 planned Zoom meetings through BAAD. So cool.
Is it too late to ask a question?
No, go right ahead.
Hi, Sarah. It's Ronnie.
Hi, Ronnie.
Smith. We met before. Hi. Hello. So I'm speaking from England. So as I was listening to you read the opening chapter, I was thinking about Dorothy Allison's essay in the writer's notebook about place, and particularly she says, and I'll just quote from her, she says, "I need to know the person walking the landscape, seeing the landscape, remembering another landscape, putting that landscape on top of this landscape. Then suddenly I'm not in one place, I'm in 2 places, and there's a narrator, and the narrator is making language choices, and that's landscape. It's a landscape on the page." Immediately what I was struck by in listening to you was the kind of role of cartography, map making as a character. And I wondered if you could talk about both the presence of the city and the cartography of the city within the novel, but also how that intersects with the cartography of the characters.
It's the only world I know. I mean, it's all I've ever written about is New York, and it's the only thing that I really understand. And I don't even I can't even theorize myself about that, because I'm really like probably the most provincial person you've ever met. And that's really more what it is. It's just that it's New York. If it was Winesburg, Ohio, it would have been a completely different kind of life. Mm-hmm.
That was good. She said you're in love. Yeah, she called to see if we were dead. Because with the news, it looks like we're all dead. I told her we're not.
I can't hear you. Oh, well. All right, then.
Are you guys still there?
I'm here.
Oh, goodbye.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
It's wonderful. I had to take a phone call in the middle.
Thank
Love you.
Bye.
Carson. More later.
Bye.
Give them hell.
Bye, everybody. Have a great evening.
Bye.